George Majchrzak joins me. Welcome, George.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
What age did you really get into books? Do you remember if you go back?
Well, I've I started reading like at 2, but it was through like Sesame Street and Golden Books. And then I was one of the more advanced readers through elementary school, but then there was a point in middle school where I just like couldn't be bothered to read. I just
Really?
I lost all interest in school
Yeah.
and just because of everything that was going on in my own like social life and everything. And I was only interested in reading like Stephen King, H.P. Lovecraft, Poe, and I had no interest in reading what we were the stuff that was assigned.
Yeah.
That
Forced
carried me,
forced to read it. Yeah.
yeah, and that carried me through high school.
Okay.
And so I would just read enough to do the tests, and then it turned around in college. I had a course where it was my freshman year at University of Toledo, and it was called Writing About Literature. It was writing intensive course, and we did Margaret Atwood, so The Handmaid's Tale, Cat's Cradle by Kurt Vonnegut, Crying of Lot 49, and in another class, it was an African history course. I read Chinua Achebe, so Things Fall Apart. Cut to the next summer, and I school ended, yeah, the first week of May, and then I had at the time I was working at UPS, and my shift didn't start until 4 o'clock. So I'd wake up in the morning and I had like 6 hours, and so I was like, okay, well, what am I gonna do? First month I played PC games, and then I played them so much, I was like, I am burned out on playing PC games. What else can I do? I know I'll go and finish those books I didn't finish in the fall semester. And the first one I grabbed was Cat's Cradle. And you think, well, it's technically it's a novel, technically it's a novella. It's about 190 pages. It's like 175 chapters. Started from the beginning, melted in my hands. I was like, whoa, okay. And then I went ahead and I read. Then I did the same with Achebe, and then I said, "Well, that was a pretty good book. I'm gonna go check out some more Vonnegut." So I went over to Thackeray's Books, which was the bookstore in Toledo, and I just started. I got after Cat's Cradle, Slaughterhouse Five, of course. I picked up God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, and then just started going down the list, and one after the other, just boom, 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 reading. And then through college, I was reading a lot of. I discovered Tom Robbins, and I get a lot of flack for this one. People like to tease me, but Bret Easton Ellis, people like, oh, because I like American Psycho, and I've read it like five, six, 7 times. They're like, that book is terrible. I'm amazed that they made such a great movie out of it. I'm like, so I still read it. But yeah, that and um, Less Than Zero.
Zero,
And
yeah.
then
I like those
Glamorama
ones.
was
I
one of
like
the
those.
last books I read before I left for grad school.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And
So you had those on your mind. Go
yeah,
again. Wow.
so it
Were
was
you an
Glam.
English major? You were an English major, right?
I I started as a math major. I
Whoa.
was I was listening to my parents' suggestion,
Okay.
and they're like, "Oh, you should major in math." And
Almost
so
everybody I've talked to have has this story where their parents wanted them to do one thing and
yeah,
they started doing it and then they
I
kind
actually the before when I entered college, I took a gap year here, another gap year there, and I started by going to the community college. I wanted to do something in music,
oh, okay.
and because I thought I was going to play guitar,
Nice.
but the irony of ironies, I went to see the Kiss reunion tour in '97,
Me too,
and
yeah.
I stood there staring at Ace Frehley the whole time, and
Yeah.
that was my epiphany moment. Like, I can't do that. And the irony is that Ace is one of the most like, not that he's like technically great, but he inspired an entire generation of guitar players to pick the
Yeah,
like
huge.
Dave Snake Sabo of Skid Row or Dimebag Darrell of Pantera. He's like the guy who got
Yeah.
them all to play. And I'm like, yeah, I can't even play like pentatonic licks. Like maybe I should find something else. That was when I decided to listen to my parents. They said you should study math.
Wow. Wow.
And then
That's
I went in and but I was a few years out of school, and so I had to like brush up college algebra 1, trigonometry, and then calculus, and I got a B plus in algebra 1. I'm like, that's a good grade, not if you want to be a math major. And then I got a B in trigonometry, and then I got a C in calculus. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's the
getting
sign
worse.
right there.
You're going down. Yes.
Yes. So I left that, went over to the business school. And so I studied a lot of like economics and marketing and everything. And I just sat there going, I'm miserable because the end game, all you do is just you make money. That's the whole purpose of business. And I'm like, that's not me.
Hmm.
And the whole time I was doing that, studying that, I was reading a lot. So the Vonnegut, I went through a whole period where I was reading Kurt Vonnegut, Joseph Heller, uh, Johnny Got His Gun, um, Dalton Trumbo, Johnny Got His Gun. And I read all these kinds of books, and I was also reading a lot of Henry Rollins. So the big book he had out at the time was Solipsist. I can never say it. And I was journaling all the time. And I'm like, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
So, and um, I went to spring break in 2000, and I had my mom come with me, and we walked around New York City, and I was just like bathing in the city. I was like, I'm in Washington Square. I'm in, like, this is great. I'm like somewhere around here in a dorm room 25 years ago, like Rick Rubin was meeting Russell Simmons and starting Def Jam. And I'm thinking, and like a few blocks over from here is CBGB, and think about like all the great bands from there. And I'm like thinking about all the writers who were here, and
Oh yeah.
like Dylan and Twain, and even H.P. Lovecraft stopped in New York
Wow.
City for a while. And I was just like, this is it. Like, this is, on the way home, that was like the big reveal. I said to my mom, yeah, I got to do something creative. And so then I officially changed my major to English, and then it stayed there. So they were thinking about ROI, but similar to the grades, like, well, he starts here as a math major and then a business major, and then now he's an English major. So
Well, at what point did you decide that you wanted to pursue an MFA in writing?
the so that semester, I just happened like secretly I was still on the books as a business major, but I took a creative writing course. And I go in, and I was just like really nervous taking this creative writing course, and it was with Tim Geiger, who is a poet at the University of Toledo. And the the first section we did in there was it was one of those courses where you do fiction, short story, then poetry, and then maybe an essay at the end. And I did, no, that class was just fiction and poetry. So think about it. But you have three short stories, and then you have like three or four or five poems. And the first story I wrote, I must have heard him wrong, but the story he like they he's like, just really focus on getting a place down, getting a setting down. And so it was, I did that part of I treated it as an exercise, not so much as like writing a story. So there was no real plot to it. And so I looked at it, I'm like, not a good story, but well, okay. But anyway, so we did the short stories, and then we did poetry. And I didn't write poetry. I in When I wanted to be a musician, a guitar player, I wrote song lyrics
Lyrics, yeah, that's where it starts.
all the time.
Yeah,
But I'm a metal fan,
yeah,
so I grew up listening to Metallica and Megadeth. So I was writing these like all about war and how war is bad, and corporate, the evil of corporate America. Like I
yeah,
knew what I was talking about. Like, you're 15 years old and you have no idea.
yeah.
But that was the stuff I wrote. And so I'm like, well, I can't really write that for poetry. So I actually just kind of I was winging it. And I wrote this poem, and he's going through we were like breaking up into groups to, like, go over each other's work. And we all hand in like a copy to him. He's going through and he's sorting them, and he comes upon mine. Hey George, you mind if I read this to the class? What?
Whoa.
Go ahead. All right. And then he read it out. And so, because for me, as far as like structure, like, like a three-act structure, or like in a poem, you have your, I don't know, your exposition, and then there's the turn at the end, and then you have like you have the last line to you stick the landing. Apparently, I knew how to do that just instinctively. And he read it, and I was just, thank you for reading it. Then met up with him because he was the advisor for my half of the alphabet
Oh yeah.
for all the English majors. And he said, yeah, maybe you should pursue an MFA. Like,
Wow.
all
Really?
right, I'll do it. And then I did my fiction workshops, my poetry workshops, did my nonfiction workshops, and I got complimented by my. They threw out the word talent, and I'm like, wow, okay, because I was never used to hearing that word, or like
Yeah,
hearing that kind of like, building you up. It was
yeah,
always somebody breaking me down. So
yeah. Oh,
I didn't do it I didn't do it the best way. So I don't know the application process now, but at the time I said, because I know what my sister was going through at the same time. She was taking GRE. And I said, okay,
oh yeah. The GRE test is
that's what I said. I said, okay, I'm going to go through a set of schools that don't require the GRE, because I don't want to spend the money on taking the test.
yeah.
And I was like, I'm going to New York. Like, that's the
Definitely
goal.
wanted to go to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in New York. In the New
Somewhere, and it was just those two vague
Yeah.
criteria. And I ended up at Southampton College, because I went to Tim's office. He wasn't there. And then he had the poster with the little cards at the bottom for application, or like if you want to send off for information. Okay. Plucked it off, filled it out, send it off. Got the packet. I'm like, whatever. Okay, I'll fill. Not knowing at all what was going on. There was no structure in our lives with any of this. We were just like white knuckling it through everything, and sent it off, got the brochure, applied, and that was one of the two schools that accepted me.
Nice, nice.
And I
It
was
was
like,
all through the mail back then, right?
yeah,
So
it was all through.
took weeks. Yeah.
I did. This is how long ago it was. It was Kinko's.
Wow. Okay.
So I had to go through and take all my samples, go to Kinko's. Do you remember going to Kinko's and having to use the padlock?
I don't know. I remember going to Kinko's and running stuff off. I don't know if it was for the same application,
Yeah,
but I went through the same. Yeah, we went to the same college, obviously, and
yeah. They
uh,
had they had the padlock where you would stick it into a slot, and the padlock would it would tally the number of pages you had just copied. and it was I think I applied to 5 or 6 schools, and I had like a 25-page sample. So it was like 150 pages of copies, and however much that was. I think it was like $10 or $15 or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then it wasn't collated. So I had to go take this
Oh,
stack of, and then in my bedroom, I was going through, and I put on a CD, 3 CDs on random, and I was going through one, two, three, four, five, two, two, three, four, three, two, three, four, five, and it was yeah, and it sent it off that way.
and you
And
applied
then
to how many? Three?
what? What's that?
How many did you apply to?
Five.
Five. Okay.
And one of them was American U, and Tim was like, "Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that," because
Oh,
it's gonna be way too expensive.
it's expensive. Yeah.
Um, what was there was one school in Kansas. It might have been Wichita,
Wow. Really?
and that was a risk because I don't think they even had nonfiction on the books at the time.
Uh,
Um, and they're like, and they just like flat out said, no, we don't have nonfiction or whatever. What was the other one? Wilmington in North Carolina,
oh, okay.
because that one had a great reputation. I could have applied to the local school to Bowling Green, but I knew I wanted out of town.
Okay. You wanted to leave.
Yeah, I wanted to leave. Um, you spoke with have you spoken with Sean DeLauder?
Yes. So I did. And that's there are two authors I want to thank you for introducing me to, two
Mm-hmm.
Ohio authors. And Sean is certainly
Yeah,
one of them. I got to talk about his books here, the recent Sex Assassins,
I haven't picked that one up
uh,
yet.
Least Envied. I got
Yes,
this
I
one
did.
on the cover. And these two I really love. I love well, Speaker of the Trees.
Yep.
That's great. And this one, Millennium Man. I think I'm going to use
Mm-hmm.
this in one of my classes next
Yeah.
semester. That's a really. I got to get the new one. The new one's on the way.
He
So
will.
Sean DeLauder. Yeah. So you know Sean going way back.
We met briefly, like in middle school. We were both audiovisual workers. We started
Ah,
hanging out in high school.
really?
We were
That's way back. Yeah. That's.
we were in. I guess we would have like the whole time. We were on the Quiz Bowl team together, and we used to joke that we were like the best dressed Quiz Bowl team because I was always blazing Metallica and Megadeth t-shirts, and like the rest of us were all wearing sports memorabilia. Like I'm a Detroit guy, he's a Chicago guy, so he was always wearing Blackhawks and Bulls stuff. He was a big Jeremy Roenick fan and Ryan Sandberg and of course Michael Jordan. So we started hanging out that way. We were in chemistry one year, and then we were in physics the next year, and then we played a lot of hockey together. And then so he actually, when he entered college, was a pharmacy major.
He was telling
So
me.
again,
Wow.
this theme going on. He was a
Yeah.
pharmacy major, and then he's just like, "What am I doing?"
What am I doing? Yeah.
And then he studied English at BG. And in Northwest Ohio, you've got UT in Toledo, and then 20 miles south of there, you got Bowling Green. And then Bowling Green is, I mean, they're both quality schools, but Bowling Green has a reputation of being more artsy.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
theater, music, and literature. And then UT is more for business and engineering, and they're also making cuts too, so to the humanities. But I think that's kind of a universal thing right now. That's what I'm hearing about the state of college right now. But they also had an MFA, have an MFA in English, and so when it came, like I could apply there, but I don't want to because I just want to get out of the Midwest.
Get far away for a while and
Yeah,
experience something different.
yeah.
Yeah.
And like I was like, I've got to go to New York, and
Cool. Cool.
And so the funny thing is, you know how we Gen Xers we're always characterized as being like feral.
Yeah.
And to a degree, yes, I was that, but I was also very sheltered. My parents, my parents, I was kind of like the character to go dark. I was like the the protagonist in the Metallica song Dyer's Eve. Dear mother, dear father, what is this how you have put me through? And they were always trying to like protect me and like keep me from like learning stuff. And so then I said, "Yeah, I'm going to New York." Like, what?
Oh, oh boy, yeah.
And so I'm 630 miles away from them, and then like, yeah, I'm living and experiencing things, and they were that was like, you know, the grip was loosening, and
Yeah.
so
Wow. So you ended up choosing Southampton.
hmm
What was there anything that made you choose that?
location.
Just the location, yeah.
Just look, yeah, I'm like, well, it's at the end of Long Island. Okay, well, how? But there was, I remember when I got the brochure and it said that there was a Long Island Railroad train station right there on campus. I'm like, that's beautiful. Then I get
Yeah,
there, I'm like,
right.
oh, it was shut down like a year ago. All right.
That's terrible.
And
Oh,
so the first weekend I got there, though, there was another guy. He was from St. Paul, Minneapolis, and I don't know why he chose Southampton, maybe for cost, because apparently he got into Iowa. I'm like,
wow.
wait,
Why did you do that? Yeah,
what?
that's
Why?
wild.
Yeah. And he's like, well, it's the people we you know who are going to be teaching us. And I'm like, I don't know who are teaching us. And this is like Google
How
was
did you find what was there a
again,
brochure? It was a
it was the
brochure on the
poster.
door. Oh, a poster, yeah.
It was the poster in the
So
hallway, right?
they had marketing people that went out all across the country that
Mm-hmm.
this. They put these posters up and
Yeah.
wow, and it
And it
worked.
was all chance. And
Yeah.
so these are it's 2002. I'm in the dorm room and I'm about to have my first class. And I'm like, well, who are these people? And this is, I wasn't even using Google yet. I was using Yahoo search.
Yeah, I mean, even the internet was young back then.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a different world now.
Wikipedia wasn't a thing yet. And
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
was like trying to search, like, okay, well, who is Jules Pfeiffer? And then I pull up, I'm like, oh, that guy wrote Popeye. What am I doing here? And like some of the people who are like connected to. And so Billy Collins, I'm like, who's
Yeah,
Billy
yeah.
Collins? George, he's Billy Collins. He has an office right over there in Washington, D.C. He's the poet laureate. You don't know these
Yeah,
people?
yeah.
No. And so then I realized I was taken, being held by my feet, and dropped into the deep end and just like completely. And so I walked around for 2 years, just like, what am I doing here? I
Wow.
completely
Just in the
in
cloud.
the moment I didn't get as much out of the program as I could have because I was always constantly comparing myself to the other people.
Yeah,
Like that,
most of us, I think I went through the same thing.
yeah,
I think it's very common to kind of second guess yourself and
yeah.
wonder what it is you're doing here. And it's
The other
very
thing
common.
was I don't know if you went through this too. The Everybody knew what they were. Like my friend Seth, he knew he was a poet. My friend Jeff, or my roommates, Jeff and Nate, they were poets. That guy from Minneapolis, he was an accomplished poet, but he's like, no, I'm here for fiction. A woman, a friend, she was a playwright.
Very
Somebody else,
decided on what they wanted to write.
and I was like, I'm a dabbler.
I'm with you. I don't want to commit to one. I
Yeah.
want to when I was in that program, I took everything. I took fiction,
Mm-hmm.
poetry, nonfiction. I
Yep.
took some interesting nonfiction type courses.
Yeah.
I think speech writing was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't really want to focus. When it came time to the thesis for that, obviously I had to commit to something, so I chose
Right.
novel. So,
I did. It was no real like. surprise or secret. I had designs on doing stand up, and I did it a couple of times, and then I realized my personality. I'm just like I'm too afraid of people, and so I like no. Plus, when I would write the script, I would write it like an essay. So not like setup, bump, 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 setup punch, but bump. I couldn't write like that. There are people who obviously I don't I don't want to say the name, but Bill Cosby, because of everything that's come out, but he was the like the guy who could tell stories. And then other people like from our generation, David Cross, he tells a lot of stories, but it's like he's telling a story and then there's a punchline. There's another punchline. There's another punchline. Or like somebody like Mitch Hedberg. Mitch Hedberg was he embeds the punchline in the middle of the joke, and so and I couldn't do that, and but there was one semester where oh goodness, Stephen Canfor, he was no longer with us, but Stephen Canfor came and he was invited to teach a course on comedy. I was like, well, okay, well, I'll jump at that, and we took that, and it was a great course because we would watch all kinds of different stuff. Like one week we watched Jackass the movie, and that actually caused a couple of women in the class because it's Jackass, so it's boy humor and
Yeah, it
it's
is. Yeah.
crude and everything. So a couple of
Yeah.
the women left the room because they're like, I
Wow,
can't take it
really?
because
Yeah.
there was something that was like literally vomit inducing
Oh,
to the guys in the movie.
in the movie, yeah, yeah.
And so with them vomiting, that caused the women to want to vomit, and it was ugly. Oh, Henry Rollins was in that too, as I recall. He does the Steve-O got a tat. Henry Rollins is driving around. They're in the desert. He's driving around a dune buggy, and Steve-O is getting a tattoo, I think, of his own face. As Henry Rollins is just they're shaking it, and then so he's got this like tattoo. It's vaguely of a head shape. It's just like pinpoints and everything. So that was pretty funny. But then we watched that, and then did we have to come up with our own like gross out jokes or something like that? I think that was optional.
That was the yeah.
But then I was like trying to find my voice and trying to figure out like how am I going to do this? And that year for spring break, we Brian is his name, the guy from St. Paul. We went out to Ireland, and it was like this is great. So we went to Kilkenny for a few days, and then we went to Dublin, and then we tried to go out to Galway. I ate something. I ate a salad, and I got food poisoning, so I never got to go to Galway because of the food
Oh, wow.
poisoning.
Oh, that's terrible.
But oh, that was awful too because he was like 6'5", 6'4". He was huge, and we got this tiny little like Kia, and so he was miserable. He's in the passenger seat, just like I can't move, and I had to drive. We had to drive from Galway back to Dublin to catch our flight back home. And I had, because of the food poisoning, I had spent an entire day and a half vomiting. So the contractions of my stomach muscles, and I'm trying to like,
Oh.
I'm driving the car trying to sit upright. Oh, it was murder.
Oh.
But anyway, happier days on that trip. We ended up in Dublin, and we were doing a James Joyce bar crawl. We ended up in this one place, and we're sitting here, we're sipping our Guinness, and the Bricklayer's Lament starts playing. And I'm listening to it. Wow, this is hilarious. And it's all about a guy who goes, he's like, he's telling his foreman why he can't show up to work that day. And it's because at another job site, there was a load of bricks above him, and he grabbed a rope, and then the bricks fell and it propelled him through the air. And then he came falling down on the bricks, and then he was in a pile. And I was like, that's, oh, I forgot the premise. We watched cartoons. We watched cartoons that week Then I went off to Ireland, and that's how I got my concept for the script for the cartoon I had to watch. So I wrote the bricklayer. I took the lyrics for the Bricklayer's Lament and then put Elmer Fudd in that. Then in class, I performed the Bricklayer's Lament as Elmer Fudd. And so I was like,
Nice.
like speaking like Elmer Fudd the whole time, and the room got really quiet around me. Okay. And it was like 6 minutes or whatever of me reading like Elmer Fudd, and the room was quiet. And I'm like, am I bombing? Is this funny? Like, I don't know. So there's no reaction. And then
Oh
I
no.
finish and I look up and Canfer's watching me. I think
Um,
that's the best thing you've produced all semester. I was like, well, why aren't you laughing?
yeah, why everybody's so serious?
So, so anyway, so that was the one that class was great. And then I took another, like a comedy writing class, and I started thinking like, yeah, I can be really funny. I can be really funny. And I started getting a big head. Then we go to another comedy class, and then there was this other guy in the program, and he just obliterated everybody. He had
Ooh,
this one where we had to write two different people. Like you have it's a one situation told from two different people's perspectives. And so it was a guy going to the hospital for a checkup, but then the other person's perspective is this insane attendant person working there out of his mind. And the whole time he keeps repeating, I'm a pepper, you're a pepper, the old Dr. Pepper. And he tries to like, the patient is in here and he's kind of goofy and he's like, oh, okay. He starts like playing bongos on the skeleton in the waiting room with him. He's like, and then the attendant comes in, sees him playing the bongos on the skeleton's head, and he's feeling mortified by it. Then you get to see the attendant's perspective later on. The attendant then it the climax is when the attendant tries to strangle the guy with the pillow. He's trying to yeah. So he's trying to kill him with a pillow, and like everybody was laughing. The instructor was laughing, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm not as good as he is because he's got it. He's funny. So so it was a real struggle trying to figure out what is it I'm going to write for the thesis. That was so I had like one of my heroes is George Carlin. So I wanted to do
I love his work too.
some of his stuff. I wanted to do like clever word humor, and then the other half of it was going to be like David Sedaris, so going to be
Wow.
funny personal essays. I would later, when Patton Oswalt his some of his books, it would have been like that was like the idea right there in hand. And I'm like, but I'm not Patton Oswalt, and I'm like 15 years apart, like student George trying to write this stuff and then seeing a professional like Patton Oswalt, like that was the vision, but I didn't have the goods,
Oh,
at least not 15 years ago.
yeah.
And so when I presented some of the stuff to my advisor, it was a brutal phone call. He's like,
Really?
well, this first essay here, that's not even an essay. We'll just throw that one aside.
Oh.
Ouch. It was really brutal, like honestly, just
Wow. Wow.
it's like this one here, it needs a lot of work. So he's like, you know what? I'm not interested in your comedic aspirations.
Whoa.
Okay. I want to know about the serious writer, George. Okay, that sounds a little bit better. So why don't you take this piece here, this personal essay, and why don't you build it into a whole memoir? Okay. And that was kind of like the end of the phone call. And so at on the one hand, it was a gut punch, but on the other hand, it was trying to, be encouraging.
Redirect you and
Yeah. But the problem was me being like again with the sheltered and everything. I didn't know what's a memoir. Like, what's the difference between a memoir and a autobiography? So
yeah.
when I approached the memoir, I was just kind of winging it, and I set it up as an autobiography. then I'm thinking like I would go back later on and I would revisit that. And that's kind of where I am right now, is looking at different periods of my life and then writing memoirs about those. So like a memoir about growing up where I did K through 12, and then another memoir in like my 20s going through college. And that one's kind of like working. So working at UPS and then going to school and then hanging out in Bowling Green on the weekends. And then the other one is like my adult life. And it's kind of funny because there's bleeding and overlap. So it's like you have college, but then you have grad school. And I worked through all of them. So I've written pieces about when I worked in the wine business on Long Island. And when you if you are working, well, have you ever worked retail?
Yeah,
Is
oh
that
yeah,
ever?
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so there are always going to be regular customers and there are characters everywhere. And so that's like going through the guy who hopped in my truck one time when I made a wine delivery. Like that's pretty freaky. I walked, he was a regular and I knew him, but I didn't want him in my truck.
Sure, yeah.
But for a tip, he gave me a sombrero. Like, thank you, lad. Thank you for the ride. And
Endless stories. I'm sure
here's
that's
a
about.
sombrero.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so it's trying to piece together like this is a memoir here, this memoir here, this memoir here.
So when you graduated with the MFA,
Yep.
your thesis as it was that early first draft of the earlier years.
Yes.
Yeah. And now it's
Element
kind of that story has continued. You've
it
expanded.
focuses on it focused on I think basically first grade to about like third grade. It was about as far as I got with that.
Yeah.
And I look back at those early drafts. Oh no, because I was really it was really like sanitizing like my home life and everything. Because I was my parents were abusive alcoholics. They're both narcissistic, and my the way I was putting it was like I was trying to milk every situation for humor, and I'm like that's not the focus of this. Like no, you so the way I was the real story was how I got to be who I am, and those were those seeds were planted in that era. And so I have, as an adult, I struggle with social situations, and a lot of that goes back to elementary school, growing up in this strange town of Northwood, Ohio, and it was I got abused at home by my parents, and then I would go to school and I would get bullied all day.
Yeah.
And so when I met Sean, Sean was like one of the few friends I made in K through 12. So,
Wow. Wow. Sean's a great guy.
yeah, he is.
And I really enjoy his books too.
Yeah.
I love that he's producing so many books and he's just unbelievably productive. I wish.
He is he's he's inspiring because he's always writing, and he once he figured it out that this is what I should be doing, he never gave it up.
Yeah.
I'm the cautionary tale
Yeah.
because I got the degree, the MFA, and then I went to work. And I was trying, and I always had like my parents in the back of my head going, you need to have a job first. And if you want to do something creative, you got to do it on the side. And that's a complete wrong way to approach it. Like, no, it's like Bukowski says, don't try. You have to do it.
Just do it.
You have
Yeah.
to get in there and do the thing.
Well, what did you do right away after the MFA? Did you stay in New York or did you go back to Ohio right away?
I couldn't go back to Ohio. So what happened there was my my parents, they're from Detroit, and they moved to Toledo, and we grew up there, and then we stayed through college. Once my sister graduated, she graduated from high school, then my parents were like, okay, they're done with high school. They're going to be going to college. We can start getting things going. Throughout college, they did things like they got a new roof, they got a new garage doors. And then by the time we finished college, and then now we're going to grad school, they're like, we are moving. And so then they did. My sister, it's kind of weird because my sister, she was only in Ohio for that short period. She's actually been back in Michigan for most of her adult life. She's been in Michigan longer now than she ever was in Ohio. And so while I was in the MFA program my first year, they were in the process of selling the house. And then we came back, had our last Christmas in Northwood in '02. The next year, going back to for the second year of MFA, they moved. And so when I finished, I spent that whole semester trying to get work on Long Island. I was like, I'm going to stay on Long Island, or I'm going to move to the city, or whatever I'm going to do. I'm not going back to the Midwest. Yeah, you are. And so I had no job lined up, so I moved back with my parents. But they by that point they were living in Brighton, Michigan,
Oh, okay.
and I knew nobody. So my first job after the MFA program, I stocked shelves.
Oh my God.
I got a job at the Meyer on Grand River Road in Brighton, Michigan, and I stocked shelves in the in the grocery department. And I would talk to people, and they're like, "You have a degree in what? What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What?"
Yeah. Were
And
you
then
angry about that, or you just accepted it? You knew you had to do what you had to do?
I wasn't happy. I mean,
Yeah.
because I was there was also a little bit of ego involved because I'm like I'm a 26-year-old and and now I'm stuck. I had to live with my parents again. This sucks. Yada yada
Yeah.
yada.
Yeah.
Then a lot of us kind of like were dispersed. My classmates, but then they were networking and somebody got a house and another guy got a house and they're like, who wants to come back and live with us? And so my friend Jeff, I mentioned him, the poet,
Yeah.
he's like, you guys have a house? And so he was right back out there.
Where in New York?
Um, they were they found rental places in Southampton.
Oh, okay. So
Like
back. So you
somebody
went
else
back
might
to
have,
New York.
yeah.
Wow.
Somebody found a rental in Sagaponack. Somebody else
Okay.
found a rental in Hampton Bays.
Uh,
And then they were out there. School started in September, and I was like, "Oh, you guys are out there? Okay, well, what are you doing?" "Oh, well, I'm working at Pier One. I'm working at Bookhampton," and then most of them were tending bar.
okay.
And I'm like, "Huh? So you're working retail? I'm working retail. You're out there. What am I doing here?" And so
Yeah,
I
you
had a
might as well go back and be with them, right?
yeah, and so I had a that was the other thing. I finally started dating there, and I met a girl, and she was still in the program, and I'm like, I'm just gonna go back. So I lived with her. I split time between her dorm room and a hotel that was between like Hampton Bays and Southampton. So I would split time between the two of them. And then I got a job working for a wine shop called Southampton Wines, which is no longer, it's the shop is still there, but it's under a different moniker. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's in Watermill. It's the one stoplight in Watermill. I don't know if you were familiar with
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, a little bit.
there was the Citarella. So there was vitamin shop out front, and then a dry cleaner, and then my shop, my wine shop, and then Double Rainbow, and then Citarella was there, and all the Blockbuster was there too.
Oh, Blockbuster.
Yeah, and so and like none of those things like Citarella moved out from that location. They still have the one in East Hampton. Blockbuster, of course, is gone. I think it was Soul Cycle. I think was the name of it. It was a like a women's gym, so a lot of like spinning classes. And so I got to work. I got a job working for that wine shop. And that actually proved to be like in my time in the wine business, like the best time because it's it's a resort. The Hamptons a resort. So I would show up and we would stock some of the shelves, and then we even during the season you had plenty of downtime. We called it the tour bus syndrome, and I could read and I could write. And so I would write and then I would go home and type out what I had written that day and then get up and do it the next day.
So all these years later, you've still been dedicated to writing. You've still really kept at it.
Yes and no. There were
Back
times where
on, it's on and off.
yes.
Okay.
And then it's actually been the last like 8, 9 years where you mentioned like being dedicated to reading. I ended up being a professor for a while, and there were no classes one summer. So I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? So I just started reading. And, I'm like, well, I'm gonna get back into reading and reading and reading and reading. And so somewhere in there, I heard that the average CEO reads 50 books a year. I'm like, okay, that'll be my goal. And
Nice.
so so I since about I kind of look at this. I don't mean to be like any kind of hubris, but it's sort of like Shakespeare's lost years. I'm emerging from like my dark years right now, where
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was,
Nice, nice.
and so I from like 2015 to like now, I've read like 400 books, like
Wow.
new titles
Yeah.
and I went back and I would read old books of like old
Classics.
favorites.
Yeah.
Well, not classic, but old favorites. So
Old favorite.
even
Okay.
like Tick comics. You
Okay.
remember the Tick comics, and I reread goodness, well, Brady Snell, bringing him back up. I went through and I reread his books, all the Vonnegut,
Just
like
anything you enjoyed, really, right?
mm-hmm. And
Nice.
so, and then of course reading new titles. And we have a great library here in town, so I'll just go to like what are the new releases, and I'll just grab nonfiction, like marketing books, sociology books, political books, but also memoir, a lot of memoir, and and then I've got all these books. And then of course you had COVID. Nobody's doing anything, and so I collected a ton of books then. And so you're doing nothing but reading. So that was a lot of a lot of poetry, a lot of, and I have to admit though, I don't know how you are. Do you have trouble reading poetry? Like you read one poem and then you might read another couple of poems and you're like, I'm spent.
I do break it up. Yeah, I'll do two or three, four or five poems,
Yeah.
depending on how long they are, and then I'll take a little rest.
I don't know why that is. Like why poetry is that way, but then you can sit down and you can just like read an entire novel.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It's different.
But so that it's somewhere in there. I don't know, a few years
I
ago, I
mean,
was like, you
I'm
know what?
like that with short stories too, where I won't read a whole collection of short stories. I'll only like one or two at a time. Like, I guess
Yeah.
because they're individual and they hit you with,
Mm-hmm. But then, well, then there are some collections that they're quote unquote short stories, but they're also arranged like yeah, like Dubliners.
yeah, yeah,
Dubliners is a novel, but it's arranged as chapters. Or um, Love Medicine, Louise Erdrich. That
yeah.
one's also is it a collection of short stories or is it a novel? Um, Winesburg, Ohio is the same way. And then even the Nick Adams stories, they're Hemingway, they're all short stories, but they're all about Nick Adams. But then if you buy the actual volume, the Nick Adams stories, it's arranged in his youth to his adolescence to his 20s and so on. So it ends up becoming a novel in that way. And then but if it's arranged and you're somewhere you're in your mind, you get it like that's your frame of mind. It's a novel now. Then I can force myself to read the whole thing. But if it's a
It's all
collection of short
psychological.
stories,
Yeah.
yeah, like disparate kind of ideas, then it's harder to push myself to read more than one or two. Like Greasy Lake. T.C. Boyle. I'll read that one, and then I might read another one. But you can jump around, and they're different characters. But also reading them like one sitting and then another sitting.
Nice, nice.
But anyway, so I got back into the flow of reading. I'm like, well, I'm acquiring all this new knowledge, um, and then teaching, and then realizing, huh, apparently I know what this stuff. Like now I realize 15, 20 years on, I actually know the stuff that I learned as an MFA student. Maybe I should put that into practice. And so then, and also meeting you and talking to Sean and then other people I met along the way. There's a guy I know out of Cleveland. His name is Kevin, and he was in ESL. He was his master's is an ESL student, and so but now he's a published poet and he's got chapbooks out, and I'm
Nice.
like, oh, okay, because you get it in your mind like, well, you're an MFA, so you should be writing. You're ESL, so you should be a professor teaching ESL students how to write in English. But yeah, that's my background, being ESL. But no, I'm also a writer. I'm a poet myself. And so, but seeing him put out his books, I'm like, well, if he's doing it, I can do it too. And so now it's time, to push myself, get the work out there. And then my partner Jennifer, she's get get it out. You should be writing. Work on this story, work on this poem, get it out, get your work out there. So that's kind of like where I am now is okay. You've spent all these years reading all these books, and now it's time to commit and execute and write your own stuff.
It's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So you got the support system, you got the time now, and the experience, certainly. And
Yeah.
I think that's something I've encountered with meeting a lot of indie writers. I mean, I think you could be anything for what you do in terms of work. Doesn't really mean that. I mean, there was a guy I interviewed last week, and he didn't finish college actually.
Hmm.
Never mind MFA. And
Right.
actually, I was shocked. He had never even taken a writing course. And I'm like, how? How do you write like this? That was my first question for him. How do you
Hmm.
write like this? And he ended up telling me, "Oh, I didn't take a class." I said, "What? You didn't do an
Yeah.
MFA? You didn't even do a BA in writing or anything?"
Hmm.
So I mean, there's people in all walks of life doing all different things, and they're writing, and they're
Yeah.
even if they're putting it out themselves or they're finding really small presses.
Right.
There's opportunities. I mean, there's eventually something, if you really push at it. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people walk away and they give up and they.
Yeah. That's what I found with a lot of people from our MFA program is
Yeah, yeah, a lot of them.
one guy is a brewer in Maine. Another guy he's a cellar junkie working in Napa, and he's an editor for Wine Enthusiast. I'm like, you were one of the
Wow.
best. You were one of the best like novelists in the program.
Wow. Really?
Another thing about that, like that formal instruction, and Sean, this was one of his complaints about BGSU. Yes, it's the more literary of the two colleges. Yes, it has the MFA program, but he's like, yeah, but you get the most cookie cutter crap in there. And so he's like, I mean, I don't mean to. He didn't want to discredit the women who were writing about their experiences, but he said, yeah, I read like 4 stories in 1 week, all about date rape. That same week, he had this really didactic story about this. It was like a 3 foot tall purple alien standing on top of a flagpole, waving a pair of hedge clippers. And people are like, what in the hell is this?
Yeah, they
And
thought he was
so,
a crazy man, right? I mean, that
yeah,
because it wasn't like all of the other stories they were writing. So
right.
everything ends up being the same.
Yeah.
Some of these programs can be just as damaging. I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
it really
Mm-hmm.
hurt people.
Yeah. And so like in Toledo, the literary king is in the writing scene there is Bukowski.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And everybody talks about Bukowski, and they even there was a group there every year for Bukowski's birthday. They will get together at excuse me, Wesley's Pub, over in the Old West, and I guess that's no, that's not the Old West End. My bad. Anyway, so they'll gather at Wesley's and they'll do a reading of Bukowski poetry and from his books. And So You Want to Be a Writer is the poem that everybody will get together and recite there. It's like, you know, don't try, you have to commit and everything. He he graduated high school and then he went to work at the post office, and we all know his factotum, all the different jobs he's had. And he took a few, like maybe 2 semesters at the local school, but that's like where his formal education ends, and then it was all just doing it and writing
Writing.
and
That's it.
reading.
Yep.
And
Yep.
my Henry Rollins Henry Rollins finished high school and then he went to work at Haagen Dazs, auditioned for Black Flag, ended up in Black Flag, and then just wrote his own books, put them out on his own publishing press, and now he's Henry Rollins.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a legend.
Um, but also, I mean, I don't know. I guess another hero of mine is Anthony Bourdain, and his education was culinary school, and he just kind of wrote on the side. But I mean, well, I don't know. On as far as like his mom worked for some publisher in the city, so he at least had that. But
Mm.
I mean, he was down and gritty, and he was a junkie, and then he wrote the first part of Kitchen Confidential, and then that just happened to get into the New Yorker, so he at least had that going for him. But
Once you got that piece, that's it. Yeah.
yeah,
You
but he
take
didn't
it off.
have like the formal education in writing.
Sure.
But he was a well-read guy too. Um, Harvey Picar out of Cleveland, the famous he did uh, um uh I'm blanking. Why am I blanking? Harvey Picar. I have
Him, I don't
his
know. I don't know.
American Splendor,
Uh,
the comic book American Splendor. He also didn't have he did go to college. I think he went to Case Western as a matter of fact, but he ended up working at the VA clinic, and he just started writing his own comic books. And so not and he wasn't all at all like formulaic or anything. He ended up he put himself, it's like, I guess, would he be the first major like biographical graphic novelist? I'm not sure.
yeah, I'm not familiar with him.
Okay. Um, yeah. You should look up Harvey Picar. He had some interesting run-ins with David Letterman in the 80s. David like would like make fun of him because he's just like this kind of like little goblin of a man, Harvey was. And he had, big bald spot and everything. And Harvey just take didn't take too kindly to some of to David's prodding, to Letterman's prodding. And so one time he got sick of it. And so he went on to NBC, onto the set, wearing this shirt it was just a white t-shirt, and he had written all over it about like NBC makes like produces bombs, because their corporate owners were actually Westinghouse. And Letterman was sweating the whole time, like, Harvey, why are you wearing that shirt?
Oh man. Yeah.
But yeah, good stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's also like my that's the world I come from, is
Yeah.
that kind of like blue collar world, family all from Detroit and everything. So
Yeah. Yeah. Have you read Matthew McConaughey?
What's that?
Matthew McConaughey is the guy I was talking about earlier.
No.
He's a Tennessee writer, just puts out his own stuff, never schooled in writing, and the guy's just producing a catalog of really, really great books. I was just like he knows how to hook a reader, and he's writing about working class people. He's from the South, so it's a little
Hmm.
different from
Yeah.
our experience in the North, but it's not that much different. It's all
Right.
just it's working class people, it's families, it's all just the common person, and
Hmm.
so yeah, check him out. He's really good for a nice price on Amazon.
Okay.
Uh,
So is he totally indie? You said?
Yeah, totally, totally. You'll see
Okay.
his episode hits on Monday
All
from
right.
the podcast. So
Definitely want to check that.
he's an interesting guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what
But,
else?
but yeah, let's as far as looking to your future, you're looking to get
Hmm.
some work out there now. And what are you working on? You have poems and fiction?
Uh, well, I work primarily in nonfiction. Um, I mean, I could, just Kerouac it, right? And just change the name.
Yeah, yeah,
But
totally. You could.
um, but like Sean has he's also Sean's like ridiculously creative and endlessly he's always drawing on different places and coming up with these great metaphorical kind of situations. Again, a purple alien with hedge clippers.
Yeah.
But I'm not like that at all. I'm more like very like no in it, like Bukowski, and
There's a lot
I
of
write a lot of
realism. Yeah, it's
a
about.
lot of the like my favorite characters are like very everymanish.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I hear
Cat's
you.
Cradle, Cat's Cradle starts with an everyman.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think I could write the stuff that Sean writes.
yeah,
It's so
Kafka's an
far out. Anything like sci-fi, anything
yes,
fantasy. I have a hard time with that. I give him props for
right.
being able to do that. It's tough.
Hmm. And Kafka's another influence of mine too. So and then
Oh
like
yeah,
you're
yeah,
you're just you're just another nameless like functionary
yeah.
in this greater world. And so the stuff I'm working on, like going like I said, different periods of my life. There was a period like the post high school era from like 1995 until like 1998, and then the the jobs I had then. So I worked in a restaurant, and then I worked in a factory, and I still have the scars from both. And this one story I sent out, my dad died in October of 22, and then that kind of like kicked something into motion where I was like writing about um a Thanksgiving car accident I had. And I was driving to work, and I had a Thunderbird at the time, and it was a flash snowstorm, and I was in the line of cars, and I, for whatever dumb reason, I decided to try to pass the cars, but all the cars were going to the same place, the same factory I was going to. And then I ended up flipping the car, and then came to, got life flighted and everything. And then like having this like reaction like with my parents and everything. So that period, struggles with work, struggles with dating, and there was another story. I'm having trouble like how I'm working with it. There was a few months after that. That was in November of '97. In '98, March of '98, I went to. Did you have Media Play? Did
No.
you ever Media Play?
No.
Well, Media Play was a chain of stores, and Toledo had a couple,
Oh.
and it was books, music, and movies. Obviously, all those things have become obsolete, so it's gone. And I went to Media Play, and with my friends, like how much I relied upon them, like whenever Sean and I, our friends would go out, I always would cling to them. Like I needed them there. They were my safety blanket. And I decided one day I'm going to go to Media Play, get some music. I got to Media Play and I froze in the parking lot as I took the key out of the ignition, and I just broke down and started crying. And I couldn't even get up out of the car to walk into the Media Play to go to the music section, which I had gone to a dozen times before. And I just froze, put the key back in the ignition, and drove off.
Oh man.
And the whole week I was like reflecting on this, going, "This was stupid. You've done this. Now you got to go back." So I was like, "No, you're going back. You're going back. You're going back." And I know how the story, like the whole structure and everything. And I went back. And I'm like, "No, you can do this." I got out of the car. I walked in and I walked up to the. I was still buying cassettes at this time in 1998, and I got two cassettes. And I know one of them is not going to be popular, but it was the whole swing revival. And the first swing revival album I bought was Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
Yeah.
I like Zoot Suit Right. It's a great song. So I got that and Beastie Boys Check Your Head. And I'm like, okay, I got the cassettes. All right, now go to the counter, check them out. Then I go back to the car and I'm like, I did it. I did it. I survived. And I ripped open the cellophane on the
Yeah.
Check Your Head,
Yeah.
popped it in, and then do you know Check Your Head? And it starts with Jimmy James. This next one is the first song on a new album, and it has that bass line, the dun dun da 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 dun dun dun. And I just knew in that moment, this is a special album. And I sat there for a second, and like this, like the hairs on my neck started to rise, and I broke down crying again. Only this time it was a happy cry,
Oh, that's good at least.
and it
Yeah.
was like I was able to go to this place, and it was like little victories. Like
Yeah.
I was so broken as a person after high school that I couldn't even go to the store by myself.
Yeah.
So and then so I'm like, all right, you know all the particulars of this story. How do you like put it into like actual like narrative with the narrative voice? And so that's one of the ones I've been struggling to work on right now.
Nice, nice. Well, it sounds like a lot of like really, I think inspirational pieces. There's a lot of creative nonfiction that is
Mm-hmm.
like that, that just shares experiences and I
Yeah.
think it moves people. It's appealing to a lot of people. They want to read about that. So I hope you keep working on it. I know your poetry too. It's good. Keep
I'm
working on your poems too. You got to get some of those out there.
Yeah, that's another one is I never like I'm a poet. Like I never wanted to own
Yeah, yeah.
that.
You don't have to just be one, a
Yeah,
poet. You can,
because it's a lot of poetry out there.
yeah,
A lot
there
of
is. Yeah.
people, but and it's hard to like how do you even make a ripple?
Yeah.
But the good thing though is like if you I don't know who your are your viewers going to be students or are they going to be young writers?
Oh,
But
this is going to be just, yeah, everybody.
because one thing that I have learned though is if you write nonfiction or you write fiction or you write poetry or you're a screenwriter, it's important to cross pollinate. You want to read across all genres because like if you write poetry, it can really help you tighten up your prose. It can really help you like work on metaphor and um but if you one of the struggles I also have writing poetry is I usually write prose, and so my poems end up like they have
Oh,
these really like okay, whoa, when where do I end jam? When do I break the line? Okay, um, but yeah, like reading the different genres can really help you in your chosen genre. It can really help you with your structure, with your like your word choice. Even Twitter. I know Twitter is dying. I use threads mostly, but yeah, that really helped too. Like when it was you have 140 characters, and that can really help
this is a
you.
challenge. Yeah, yeah.
Like, what's the most potent way I can express this idea in 140 words
Right.
or 140 characters?
Characters. Yeah.
Um, But yeah, that's
I love the way you put it, cross pollination of, yeah, it's a great way. That's a positive place to stop now,
oh, okay.
and we'll leave it there. Well, hopefully, be great to have you back and just chat again sometime soon. That
Yeah.
would be wonderful. And yeah, I hope you really push at this, getting your writing out there and keep at it. It's a tough struggle, but keep
Hmm.
working at it. And thanks for coming in to talk today,
Oh,
George.
thanks for having me.